Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. We've got a really fun video today. Another NBA mock draft. And here we are, finally post NBA draft lottery and the first fully known draft order mock draft on the channel for this year. I am so stoked, so excited for it. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you have been enjoying the content on the channel. We live streamed for about 4 hours yesterday. We have a whole bunch of other fun stuff planned for the future. Hopefully you've been enjoying the off-season previews. If you haven't checked those out, make sure to go do so. Very likely we have your favorite team posted on the channel. And again, thank you so much for all the love and support. We hit 11,000 subscribers, which is absolutely crazy to believe. Never would have thought we got here, but here we are, and let's keep pushing for more. So if you are new, again, hit that subscribe button. And first overall, Orlando, the Orlando Magic, a team that badly needed this selection. Very desperate of top tier talent. You know, last year they took Jalen Suggs 5th overall, and I still think that was a pretty good selection. I know year one didn't really play up to his standard, didn't really come into the league setting anything on fire, that's for sure. But second year guards always improve when it comes to finishing around the rim, and that's really Jalen Suggs' MO. He's going to take a massive step forward in year two. So don't sell your stock on Suggs. And also, moving forward, we have to look at this Orlando team as a very interesting team. Jonathan Isaac, we'll see what he looks like after writing a book. And, you know, he hasn't played since the bubble. Markelle Fultz will be back healthy. And even though I did consider Jaden Ivey here, I have changed course again back to Jabari Smith. I think this is who they would likely take first overall. It's very close, though, between him, Chet Holmgren, and Jaden Ivey. I considered all three of them. Chet Holmgren would be interesting to pair him back up with his former high school and AAU teammate in Jalen Suggs. But ultimately, I chose to go with Jabari Smith here, because I think he is such a unique talent long-term, specifically as a two-way wing. He's one of the better perimeter defensive players I've evaluated. I think he's got a lot of upside on that end of the floor, but then offensively, he's a really good, talented, skilled, tough shot maker. I think it's possible Orlando could consider trading this pick down and stay in the top 4. If another team is in love with, say, a Jabari Smith or a Chet Holmgren, I could see them maybe trying to jump up and get pick 1. But ultimately here, I think Orlando is in a really good spot, especially if they prefer to go with Jabari Smith here first overall. Second overall, Oklahoma City here now, in the Thunder. The tanking maybe has paid off. They get a top 2 pick, which is what they wanted. They wanted a very high pick to add an elite player next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, next to now Josh Giddey, next to Lou Dort, and they've got it. And you have to know this player's a Sam Presti type of player here. Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga, I had to mock him second overall. It just feels like it's a done deal. Chet Holmgren to Oklahoma City. The Thunder are like the perfect landing spot here. Thunder fans, if you like Pokusevski, you've got something better coming here in Chet Holmgren. And Thunder fans, maybe you keep your hopes alive, because I'm sure the hope is still to somehow land Victor Wembanyama next year. If you can land Holmgren and Wembanyama, oh my goodness, watch out. But even so, even with just Chet Holmgren here, it gives you a really nice, interesting pick and roll, pick and pop partner with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's an intriguing defensive option as well, who can switch out onto the perimeter, has elite shot blocking timing, and gives you a very reliable three-point shooter who can knock it down with regularity, and also someone who I think could become an anchor to a defense. I think Chet Holmgren is a very special prospect, and I think the Thunder here are getting a really good one at this spot. At 3 now, Houston Rockets here at this spot. And for me, with Houston, I think there's a few things you could consider. And 3 is really a weird spot for them, because I feel like their 2 best fits were going to be Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren. And with both of them off the board, you're kind of at a weird spot where you say, ooh, do we take a guard here in Jaden Ivey? Do we go with forward Paulo Banchero, who's not great defensively in his own right? And Houston needs to get better defensively. So I really was hoping to have either Jabari or Chet there available for them. But realistically, I think that they find themselves in this spot now. And this is a team that, you know, maybe could look to trade up. But at 3, I do have them going with Jaden Ivey, the guard out of Purdue. I do really like Jaden Ivey. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's the best player in this year's class. And I think he's a player that, you know, probably does take the point guard job from Kevin Porter Jr. I think he's a little bit more skilled as a playmaker. And I think his athletic profile really does fit well in today's modern NBA, specifically as someone who's going to be able to blow by guys whenever he wants to, get to the rim. Rockets fans know it better than anyone. When James Harden was at his best, he was blowing by everybody. And I'm telling you right now, Jaden Ivey's got extremely gifted slow to fast burst that I've almost never seen before. The only guy that I can really think of that had similar slow to fast burst in my time as a talent evaluator was Ja Morant. So you're getting a really, really intriguing prospect here at the guard position. Number 4, Sacramento, the team that shocked everyone. They move up into the top 4, and boy, did they need it. And here was Sacramento at this spot. Clearly, it should just be best player available. Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, 2 staples for this franchise. And I think now you're going to look to add a third here, and it's a really, really good one in Paolo Banchero out of Duke. He's a great offensive player who can score the ball at all 3 levels. I think specifically he's best off scoring as a mid-range shot creator, but he's also very good around the rim. The 3-point shot's got to find a little bit more consistency, and I think defensively he's got some room to grow for sure. But Sacramento, with this selection, it gives you a little bit of flexibility here. Maybe you look at a Harrison Barnes trade and try and reconstruct your roster, find a couple wings that maybe fit a little bit better with your timeline. Maybe you look at a few other moves as well that really kind of reconstruct what you've got going on here. But ultimately, I feel really, really good about adding in a Paolo Banchero next to Fox and Sabonis. Pick 5, we got the Detroit Pistons here now. And for me with Detroit, I think there's a few different things you can look for. I know this seems like one of the worst case scenarios, Pistons fans, and I understand why you feel that way. Moving down in the lottery never, ever feels good, but I still think this is a great opportunity to draft a really good player in this class, and that's Shaedon Sharpe, who coming out of Kentucky, obviously we didn't get to see him play at the collegiate level, but he's still a special talent and a really special athlete who could maybe even end up going above pick 5. He had his pro day already, showcased elite athleticism, really good shot making potential as well, with a variety of spin jumpers and pull up, rise up shots. He's very talented. I think he's one of the perfect duos that you could put next to a guy like Cade Cunningham. And I think Detroit here, even though they moved down in the lottery, still in a really good position to add some talent, specifically with Sharpe still on the board. I think it just makes way too much sense. Pick 6, we've got the Indiana Pacers here now. And for me with Indiana, there's a few things I could still consider here. Obviously disappointing here for Pacers fans that they did not move up in the lottery. This is their first time picking in the top 9 since 1989, which was so long ago, over 30 years ago to be exact. And for Indiana here, I think there's still a lot of talented players on the board. At this spot, I've opted to go with Keegan Murray out of Iowa. I think that for Indiana, you're looking for a talented 4-man who can shoot the 3 ball, play within an offense, can be a nice fit next to Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner. And this team is legit long-term still. I think with this selection, Keegan Murray really ready to come in and have a lasting impact in the NBA. And I think specifically, he's going to be a nice pick and pop partner with Tyrese Halliburton. Miles Turner as well can fit into that role. It gives you another reliable front court player to fill the void left from Domantas Sabonis departing. And I think this is a really good opportunity now for Indiana to kind of build a direction. And Keegan Murray's the type of player that Rick Carlisle is going to love. He's going to become very trustworthy. And Rick Carlisle tends to not love rookies. You know, at times I'm sure Pacers fans saw it with Chris Duarte. Carlisle probably had a tighter leash with him than he did with most of the players. But Keegan Murray is someone that over time, Rick Carlisle is going to fall in love with. And I think he's going to be a phenomenal fit into this Pacers roster. At 7 now, we have the Portland Trailblazers here again. And Portland, of course, they moved down one spot as well. Tough to see Keegan Murray go right in front of them. They would have loved to draft Keegan Murray. But ultimately, I still think Portland's in a pretty good situation here. They do have cap space this offseason. We'll see if they make a Josh Hart move to open up a little bit more room. But ultimately, they've got a pretty talented roster. Anthony Simons took a massive step forward. And this pick here actually helps them open up a little bit more cap space. They draft center Jalen Duren out of Memphis. And people might be saying, whoa, they have Yusuf Nurkic. Yes, they do, but they can actually rescind rights to him, which means that they're going to open up about $10 to $15 million more in salary cap space. They'll be able to go into the free agency period with more than a max slot, which means you could sign 2 really good players potentially and add to your core where you have Duren as your starting center long-term. We've seen Brandon Williams step up to being a consistent guard off the bench, probably. Anthony Simons, Damian Lillard, the two best players on the team then at that point. Maybe you can keep Josh Hart with your cap space then, and then you go out and try and find a 4 in free agency, or maybe you make another move yet for Jeremy Grant, and you try and pair Duren with Grant. You have Josh Hart, Simons, and Dame as your starting 5. Sounds pretty good to me. I think that's a pretty legit way to go about it. And, even if you do go that route, maybe you do keep Nurkic as well and bring Duren off the bench. I still think it's a great option here for Portland. I love Jalen Duren as a prospect. I think he's someone who's going to be really, really nice in the NBA, specifically on the defensive end of the floor. I think he's really underrated as a prospect. And ultimately here, Portland gets a good one at 7. Pick 8, New Orleans Pelicans here now. And for me with New Orleans, I think there's a few things you could definitely consider just with this spot. It's not very often we see a team picking in the top 8 that just made the playoffs, but with this opportunity here now, they're going to go ahead and take forward Ben Mathurin out of Arizona, a player who I really, really like. I love Ben Mathurin's game, specifically when he has the basketball in his hands. He's got a really nice jump shot. He gets a lot of high elevation on it, so that'll be something to watch toward the end of games and maybe throughout the course of a long 82 game season, that if he fatigues a little bit, does that impact his jump shot? But he's got great athleticism. He's very, very bouncy. And he's also someone who I think could be a nice complementary bench scorer in year 1 for New Orleans. You think about what this lineup already has. McCollum, Ingram, Zion, those 3 players are all really good with the ball in their hands. You add another one to come off the bench here in Mathurin, but I also think he's got unique cutting potential. He just needs to, learn how to use that more, learn how to play into that role. He's never had to before in the past, though he's consistently been one of the best players on his team. But you put him around a lot of other talent, I'm sure he'll figure it out. I love his athletic profile, and I think he is a nice selection here for the Pelicans. Pick 9, San Antonio Spurs. Unfortunately, even though I predicted it for them, they did not move up in the lottery, so they find themselves here still at pick 9, which is a pretty good spot to be. And with Jalen Duren already off the board, I switched it up here. I'm going with forward Jeremy Sohan out of Baylor, who I think's kind of a perfect fit into what San Antonio is looking for. Someone with good defensive upside who can guard multiple positions, give them flexibility at that 4-man position. And if he ever figures out a shot, watch out for this guy. And San Antonio is one of the best in the league when it comes to development in that area. They've got really great shooting coaches over there in San Antonio. And the one thing about him, he's one of those 0.5 decision makers. He likes to move the basketball around. He plays quick. He puts the ball on the deck. And he's a dribble, pass, shoot type of guy, which fits San Antonio perfectly. I think his defensive capabilities are his main draw. And this is the highest I've had him go in any of my mock drafts, but I definitely think it is warranted. Pick 10, Washington Wizards here now. And for Washington, I think there's a few things that they could look at. Definitely an interesting spot to be in, just given the fact that you have Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, Kyle Kuzma. You also have Rui Hachimura. And I think they're badly in need of a true center next to those guys, which is why I'm going to mock Mark Williams here out of Duke. Last year, I thought that they should have taken Isaiah Jackson. They actually traded out of that selection back to Indiana. But here, really good choice of going with a guy like Mark Williams because he can protect the rim for you. He can be that dive roll man next to your plethora of good forwards at this point. I also didn't even mention Denny Avdia or Corey Kispert. You don't need any more forwards. I considered a guard here, but just given the strength and weaknesses of this class, I figured center is a better selection at this spot and puts more pressure on other teams to try and find their center of the future. But Mark Williams, a really good option here out of Duke. First time we've seen him in the top 10 in my mock, but I definitely think, again, this is another warranted example where if a team feels like this fits them, it's definitely worthy of that selection. Pick 11, New York Knicks here now. And for me with the Knicks, I think there's a little bit of an argument to be made that maybe they would look at center with Mitchell Robinson headed toward free agency. Nerlens Noel missed a lot of last year with injury. The Knicks could definitely consider one. They could also really consider point guard, or they could just go best player available, which is what I think they're going to consider here with Johnny Davis, who's a skilled guard who can create off the dribble for himself specifically. Very consistent as a mid-range scorer. This is who they wanted Evan Fournier to be, was a Johnny Davis. I think, Fournier definitely has some positives to his game, but also some flaws. I think that they have to find ways to improve on the perimeter. Johnny Davis, a nice player in his own right because he's able to create off the bounce, very consistent as a mid-range shot creator, which is a tough thing to beat. You know, he has his down moments for sure. It's going to limit who he can be long-term. I don't see star potential here for Johnny Davis, but I see a reliable combo guard who can probably score anywhere from 13 to 16 points a game for his career, which is a pretty good number to have, honestly. And I think he's going to be a nice pickup. He also is fairly competitive defensively, and the Knicks just need to get a little bit more competitive, in my opinion. Continuing now over to pick 12, and we got the Oklahoma City Thunder here, who, of course, were one of the big winners from the lottery. This pick stays at 12, but their other one jumped up to 2. Oklahoma City has to be feeling pretty good about itself. And here at 12, you know, we had a guy fall a little bit in AJ Griffin, who he's been dealing with some injuries. I know some people are a little concerned about the fact that he's only 6'6". I think this is a perfect landing spot here for Oklahoma City. You grab Chet Holmgren at 2. You come back, take AJ Griffin at 12 if he falls to you. This is a phenomenal outcome for them, specifically because he's such a talented three-point shooter. Shot nearly about 47-48% from 3 this past year for Duke, and was really reliable in catch-and-shoot situations specifically, which when you look at the strength of this Oklahoma City Thunder team, you already have a plethora of ball handlers. SGA is very comfortable in that regard. Josh Giddey, we know how good of a passer he is as well with that 6'8" frame. Trey Mann is very talented with the ball in his hands, more so as a scorer than creator. But again, putting a little bit more shooting and spacing around, this offense will definitely help. Chet Holmgren can stretch it out to the three-point line. AJ Griffin's very good in that regard. He's also got a pretty good frame to him, so he can help in terms of the physicality of the NBA, specifically with Holmgren. Derek Favors, who picked up his player options, a pretty good fit next to Holmgren as well. I think for here, from now on, for Oklahoma City, you have to be looking for a little bit more strength and bulk. AJ Griffin brings that and is a skilled offensive player. Pick 13, Charlotte Hornets now at this spot. And I think for me, Charlotte, again, another team that needs to consider defense and specifically the center spot. I really liked their draft last year with James Bouknight and also Kai Jones. I think they drafted 2 players who are going to have good roles long term. And at this spot, I think they go with a center in Walker Kessler. Yes, I like Kai Jones, but I think Walker Kessler gives them a different option at the center position, specifically as a drop big. Now, Kai Jones gives you a little bit more flexibility. He can maybe switch out in space a little bit more. And I think Kai Jones is capable of playing the 4 at times as well. Walker Kessler, he's a true 5, stands at about 7'1". And there's no denying that Charlotte was at least somewhat interested in Jakob Poeltl this year at the trade deadline. And now they get their own version of that here in Walker Kessler, who is going to be a great drop coverage big, who is going to be very reliable protecting the rim, averaged 4.5 blocks a game this past year for Auburn. And the one thing I like about him offensively is he knows what is a good shot and what isn't. He takes a lot of easy shots around the rim, specifically as a lob threat or just sitting dunker spot, receiving a pass and flushing it home. But there's also a little bit of upside here. He started to shoot the 3 ball a little bit more this past season for Auburn. Wasn't knocking it down with a lot of regularity, only about 25% from 3. But the fact that he's even dabbling with it a little bit and the coaching staff was cool with this shows that he has some potential as a 3-point shooter. If he develops a little bit here, in my live stream yesterday, someone actually commented that maybe he becomes a Brook Lopez type. And I actually really do like that comparison for him. Now, Brook Lopez is a very good player. I don't know if Kessler's ever going to get to that level, but if he even gets close, this is a home run pick for Charlotte here. And I really, really love the outcome for them, just given the fact that he fits exactly what they need around LaMelo Ball. They need someone who can hold down the paint, and Kessler, I think the best in this draft, arguably as a drop coverage center. Sliding into pick 14 now, we've got the Cleveland Cavaliers here. And for Cleveland, I've been fairly consistent throughout the NBA draft process here, looking specifically for wings. And of course, since they did not move up in the actual NBA draft lottery, I feel like we have to continue in that chase for a wing that fits this team, because they've got a lot of good bigs. They've got some good smalls as well in players like LeVert and Garland and Sexton. So I think you're really looking for some of those medium-sized players, some guys who are about 6'5" to about 6'8". And I think Ochai Agbaji here out of Kansas is a really good fit for that, specifically when you consider his 3-and-D potential. I've continuously likened him to a player like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I don't think he's going to be nearly as good as a lot of people seem to talk about him as, but I think he's going to be reliable. And I think that's something that Cleveland didn't really consistently have out of a 2 or 3 this past year. You know, Isaac Okoro, I understood why they liked him when they drafted him, but the 3-point shot hasn't come along. Ochai Agbaji is going to be a very reliable 3-point shooter. Once he gets those laces lined up, he's going to knock it down, especially when he's open. And we know how good Darius Garland is at getting into the paint, hitting it out to 3-point shooters, and just making the upgrade over Okoro to an Ochai Agbaji when it comes to 3-point shooting will open up the floor so much more for the Evan Mobleys, the Jarrett Allens, and the even Lauri Markkanens and Darius Garlands and Colin Sextons of this offense. It's going to make everything run so much smoother there in Cleveland. Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. Attention listeners, are you ready to be blown away? Well, you asked for it and they listened. Our friends at Manscaped just relaunched the Ultra Smooth package. It's back, baby. Your new favorite tool and complement to the Lawnmower 4.0 to keep your boy smooth while looking and feeling their best. The specialized groin shaving kit is here to help you buff, protect, and shave your most sensitive areas. It's time to crop that bush of yours and get right to the roots with a discount just for you from Manscaped. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you use code utility20 at manscaped.com. Again, use code utility20 at manscaped.com. We'll have a link to the website, in the bio. And looking at right now where you're at, it's time you treat yourself. You deserve it. After Mother's Day, gentlemen, it's time you treat yourself. After Mother's Day and treating the women in your life, it's now time to treat yourself, men. You deserve it. Pick up the Ultra Smooth package at manscaped.com and use code utility20 for 20% off plus free shipping. Pick 15. Charlotte back on the clock after going with Walker Kessler at 13. And here at this spot, I see them going with Tari Eason out of LSU because I think this team does need more size and physicality. You know, I talked about finding a rim protecting big. And then I talked about how, you need to find players who fit around LaMelo Ball. One of LaMelo's biggest weaknesses that doesn't really get talked about enough in mainstream media, first of all, defensively, he is rather terrible. He gets blown by consistently, plays way too upright, plays way too slim. And you need good physical, active defenders around him. And I think Tari Eason's a great pickup here for that, if that's what you're looking for him to do. Now, he's got some offensive deficiencies. He doesn't handle the basketball super well. And I think his shooting needs to come along for sure. But you bring in a player like Tari Eason to fit around your star players. And LaMelo's the star there in Charlotte. And Tari Eason, a very nice compliment at pick 15. Pick 16, the Atlanta Hawks here now. Definitely disappointed to see Tari Eason off the board. But there's still some other good options here for them. And they're going to opt for Ousmane Dieng here out of the NBL. We talked about how we've seen LaMelo Ball really become a star in this league, and he's a former player from the NBL. Ousmane Dieng has some serious, massive upside here at this spot for Atlanta. And I know I'm already hearing some Atlanta fans saying, we don't need a guard. Ousmane Dieng could play as a small forward. You could play him as a backup guard. He is so talented that it's worth the selection here at this spot. He's a competitive defender who's got pretty active hands. He's not the quickest on his feet, but he offers really, really good size at 6'10". And he is in the right position a lot of the time. He knows how to play defense, even if he's not the most athletic or versatile defender. He's a very good team defender. And I think that's going to be huge for Atlanta, building a defensive identity that helps them get deeper in the playoffs moving forward, because we know what their offense can be. And Ousmane Dieng's got really good offensive potential as well, but I think defensively is where he's going to exclusively help Atlanta early on. And then when Trae Young goes out of the game, we know this team struggles to score the basketball. Ousmane Dieng can be your go-to guy at that point. Put the ball in his hands, let him run the pick and roll, let him get downhill and facilitate to others. He's very good in both of those regards, and I think he's going to be someone that Atlanta finds and really identifies as a massive steal at this spot. Pick 17, Houston Rockets here now. This pick comes from the Brooklyn Nets in the James Harden deal. And of course, here you're looking at EJ Liddell out of Ohio State. And with Houston drafting Jaden Ivey, I feel like it is essential to find a good defensive player at 17. Jaden Ivey, not the best defensive player in this class by any stretch of the imagination, but you come back here and rebound well by getting a good 4 who can block shots as a weak side guy, rebounds the basketball well, but isn't a liability offensively either. He can knock down open jump shots. You can put the ball in his hands at certain moments. He's going to make the right play consistently. He was really, really good for Ohio State on both ends of the floor this past year. And I think if you're Houston looking for a player who's going to supplement next to Jalen Green, Jaden Ivey, Kevin Porter Jr., this is a really perfect example of one here with EJ Liddell from the Buckeyes. Pick 18, we've got the Chicago Bulls here now. And at this spot, we're actually not moving away from Ohio State. We're going back-to-back Buckeyes here with Malachi Branham from Ohio State going at this spot. He's been a player I've really struggled to kind of pinpoint a specific draft location for, because I look at him and I like the upside. You know, you look at a player who knocks down a lot of shots, is pretty solid defensively, has a good frame to him, and you might say, wow, this kid maybe should go in the lottery, but he also just isn't good enough as a ball handler. He's not a phenomenally quick player either. His athleticism isn't off the charts. So there's definitely some downsides here as well, but I think Chicago's a really good landing spot. They're going to be looking for a little bit more depth, specifically on the wing. And I think Branham can probably fit best as a 2 or 3 in this league as we currently speak. And you have players like Levine, who I'm sure will come back, I think. DeRozan, who is very comfortable with the ball in his hands. Lonzo Ball can dribble and bring the ball up and facilitate for others. Alex Caruso to a certain extent as well. You don't need Branham to have the ball in his hands to be successful. I think he's actually a pretty good fit here with the Chicago Bulls at pick 18. Pick 19 now, here we are, and we're looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that had a really great season. They won 46 games. Patrick Beverley absolutely changed the culture of this franchise. Of course, you know, he was shaking things up by going on national television. I'm not sure how that the move's going to affect his future with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but ultimately Minnesota, look at them now differently than we did a year ago, and he's a big reason why. And I think looking forward, though, for Minnesota, there's a few more things to address, specifically another ball handler to bring in off the bench. You know, Jalen Noel really stepped up this past year, but I think he's got some flaws to his game. And there's also a lot of speculation right now around D'Angelo Russell. What's his future look like in Minnesota? For now, I think he's safe, but here you go with a massive upside swing in Jaden Hardy. For me, this is a massive steal. I loved Hardy as a player. I think he's going to be very, very good in the NBA. I think when you look at him, his talent level is fairly similar to that of a Johnny Davis, who I had go 8 picks earlier. I think this is really phenomenal value, and Minnesota gets someone who early on in his career, if you have him coming off the bench as a bench scorer, is going to excel in that role. And I think there could be even bigger, brighter things for him ahead in his career if you give him a little bit of time to develop. The end of the G League Ignite Tour, he started to play a little bit better, had some big performances to close out the season. And again, we're looking at a 12-game sample size of a 19-year-old playing for the first time against pro players. There's going to be an adjustment period there. I think he's going to be better off because of that experience. I think he comes into the NBA and plays a really nice rookie season with some ups and downs for sure. But ultimately, I feel like he's going to give a lot of security to the team that drafts him with the feeling that they made the right selection. Pick 20, San Antonio here now. And with the Spurs already having made a selection at this point, we kind of get to play with house money here and go with a player who's very talented in Nikola Jovic from Serbia, playing in the Mega Basket this past year. Showcased a lot of different types of skills that he has, specifically with the ball in his hands. He excels as a playmaker for others. He can put the ball on the deck a little bit, get to the rim, but he's also a marksman from deep. And I think San Antonio here, you have to look at this as a long-term improvement over Doug McDermott. He is going to have some defensive deficiencies, but that's where Jeremy Sohan comes into play, who can guard 1 through 5. You build a good team defense around him. Jovic can be a solid player. You get, you know, he's going to be competitive. That's the one thing I have to say about him as well. It's not like he's going to, you know, fall asleep on defense. It's just he doesn't have the best foot speed. And we've seen Greg Popovich make other players like this work in the past with Davis Bertans. And I think ultimately, if you're looking here at a Nikola Jovic, I think he's a much more skilled version of Bertans, where he's able to actually dribble the basketball a little bit, put pressure on the rim a little bit more, and just be a more complete all-around player. Pick 21, Denver Nuggets here now at this spot. And for me with Denver, I think there's a few things you could really consider, but I like Dyson Daniels here out of Australia. I think a few years ago, they kind of showed their hand that they were looking for a player like this when they drafted RJ Hampton. Obviously, they ended up moving him to Orlando in the deal for Aaron Gordon. But for me, Dyson Daniels, fairly similar player, similar height and athletic profile, and is also a good defensive player. Now, I don't think he's an elite player when it comes to scoring the basketball. I think he's got to improve his handle. But ultimately here, if he's a willing cutter and a smart player like I think he is, you can play around Nikola Jokic with that. And I think there's a lot of potential here that if he does come along as a three-point shooter and he does tighten up his handle a bit, maybe he becomes a sneaky good grab at 21. I know a lot of people are way higher on him than I am, and I see some of the upside for sure, but he does have a long ways to go in that development. But I think, ultimately there in Denver, once Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are back, you don't need necessarily all the shooting in the world. You need some good length, athletic profiles, and good defensive players, and I think Dyson Daniels fits the bill there. Pick 22, Memphis Grizzlies now at this spot. Of course, season ended the way that I don't think they were hoping, but ultimately Ja Morant comes back next season. This team just takes another step forward. Each and every player on this roster always seems to do so, and we could see them make some real noise. And at 22, I see them going with Ty Washington. Tyus Jones has played himself into a nice contract, probably with another team, which means Memphis, you're going to have to get creative about finding a backup point guard behind Ja. And I don't think there's much of a better option here than Ty Washington at 22. He's going to be reliable in the pick and roll, and he plays a fairly similar game to Tyus Jones. Not quite as disruptive defensively like Tyus can be, specifically in the passing lanes. He seems to always be tipping passes. But Ty Washington, I think, is a pretty decent offensive player, specifically when it comes to creating for others in the pick and roll. I think we're going to see him connect with Brandon Clark a ton on dives. And I also think he's going to be able to add a little bit of an element as a mid-range scorer to this offense that they are lacking. And at 22, I think this is a really good grab for Ty Washington because Memphis is a team that's ready to win. Ty Washington is going to be a good contributor for them right away. And if he grows as a three-point shooter, I think he becomes a sneaky good grab at 22 for a team that's looking to add a little bit more talent, specifically back into that backcourt with the likely departure of Tyus Jones. 23, the Brooklyn Nets here now, and at this spot, Brooklyn, they're in an interesting situation. The big three of Harden, Kyrie, and Durant just did not play itself out the way everyone would expect. There are some rumors that Kyrie maybe has played his last game with Brooklyn. We'll see if Ben Simmons ever wants to step on a basketball court again. But at this spot here, for me, I'm going with Kendall Brown simply because I think he's a very nice connector piece. And I think when you look at the Brooklyn Nets, one of the flaws that we saw against the Boston Celtics, they just did not have enough length on the defensive side of the ball. And you solve a lot of that here with Kendall Brown. He's a very lengthy player, good athlete, good in transition. Now, offensively, he's really raw. He needs to improve a lot as a three-point shooter. He's fairly raw as a three-point shooter. He knocked down about 35% of them, which you would say, okay, that's not a terrible percentage, but he was heavily reluctant to shoot it and would mainly only shoot wide open shots, which at the collegiate level is not a good sign. If he improves, though, he could become a perfect offensive fit, but ultimately you're drafting him for the defense here. The idea is Ben Simmons starts playing, Kendall Brown plays, you probably use a little bit more Kessler Edwards in year 2, and you throw a little bit more length on the floor next to Kyrie and Kevin Durant, and you play a small ball 5 lineup where you have a lot of length and size, and then 2 of the best shot creators in the world with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant on the floor. Pick 24, Milwaukee Bucks here now, and Milwaukee, unfortunately, the defending champions have fallen. They lost to the Boston Celtics in 7 games, and now at this spot, they're at the drawing board. How do we get better? And for me, I think Hugo Bassan is going to be a must-add for them at this spot, just given the fact that when Chris Middleton was out, they lacked another half-court creator who could get his own shot off. And, Connaughton plays well within a role, and everyone they have on that roster does fit around Giannis Antetokounmpo. I 100% agree, and had they had Middleton, maybe it's a different story. But ultimately, when Middleton was out of the game or out of the series, they just were not the same team. And Hugo Bassan gives you a little bit of that punch off the bench, specifically early. He's a nice gravity shooter. I think would be a really good fit next to Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's going to knock down open shots. He can also take guys off the bounce. And it's not very often you have a player here at 24 who is reliable with the ball in their hands, can knock down open jump shots, and can also play make for others to a certain extent. I think Hugo Bassan, a really good grab here. I have him in the top 14 on my big board. I think he's going to be available here right around 24, though, and it's a really, really nice sneaky ad for the Bucks, who have done a great job building this team. 25, San Antonio on the board again. Remember, after going with Sohan at 9 and then also going with Jovic at 20, now at 25, we find ourselves where maybe guard is in the books here for San Antonio. I know last year they took Primo, but this is another pretty good addition here for San Antonio in Kennedy Chandler, a player who's fallen a little bit down to 25 because there's definitely going to be some concerns about his size. Stands at about 6 feet, so he's definitely a little undersized for the position, but he makes up for it with his smarts, his hands, and his feet. He's got very quick feet and quick active hands. He's going to be a pest who gets into the passing lanes. Can also use him to pick up 94 feet. And with DeJounte Murray on your roster, you can get away with having a smaller guard next to him because DeJounte Murray has pretty good size for the position. And I think Kennedy Chandler off the bench probably does make a lot of sense for you as well. You have a lot of shooters already if you're San Antonio. You want to have another guard who can get downhill. Lonnie Walker is headed toward free agency. And if we see Kennedy Chandler play like he did near the end of the season for Tennessee, where he's getting 2 feet into the paint consistently, putting pressure on the rim, it forces defenses to collapse and help and rotate. And Kennedy Chandler is a smart enough player to not kick it out to three-point shooters and make defenses pay for those rotations like I was talking about. Moving on to pick 26 now, we've got the Dallas Mavericks here. And of course, for any of you that have been watching the channel, you know I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan, and I am so proud of this team. So if you're a Mavs fan, leave a like on today's video. They have played so well this season, and I'm really cheering them on in the Western Conference Finals. But ultimately here, Dallas, at this spot, they have to find a big. I really do believe that. Ismail Kamagate from Paris, France is a really good option. He's a smart defender who has had some monstrous games over in Paris this past year, specifically as a rim protector, which is an element that Dallas has badly missed since trading Kristaps Porzingis away. Kamagate has had multiple 8, 9, or 10 block games playing in Paris, and I think that ultimately when you look at Dallas, that's one of the elements missing from their team, rebounding and also rim protection. And if you're able to add that here at 26, it really fleshes out and complements the rest of this team. Jason Kidd has done such a great job building this team defense. And if he has a solid backline defender like Kamagate, who, first of all, is just very smart and advanced with his understanding of defensive positioning, you could really build something up here at this spot with this selection. Again, I think a really nice pickup for Dallas. 27, Miami Heat here now in Miami, another team that's made it to the conference finals. They've had, again, a really incredible season. We'll see how the Eastern Conference Finals plays out for them. It would be funny to see another Heat Mavericks matchup in the finals. That would be insane to see for sure. But 27, I have the Miami Heat going with Christian Koloko out of Arizona. First time I've actually mocked him in the first round. And he's a player I'm not extremely high on myself, but I could see the appeal for him here, specifically behind Bam Adebayo, who consistently does miss time throughout the regular season. Koloko specifically will help you when Bam Adebayo is out of the game. He's specifically a very solid rim protector in his own right, does it a little bit more with athleticism than a guy like Kamagate, but I think is going to be reliable off the bench for Miami. We know how good they are as well when it comes to development. It feels like you should almost draft him a guard because they do such a great job developing guards. We've seen that from guys like Hero, Duncan Robinson, Strus, Gabe Vincent as well. And if you draft a guard in the first round and let them develop that guy, maybe he becomes a special player. But also I just think at this spot, center Christian Koloko just makes way too much sense. They need to find another backup big. Dwayne Dedmon's headed toward unrestricted free agency. Not that he's going to have a huge market or anything, but ultimately I could see them moving on for a younger guy like Koloko. 28, Golden State Warriors here now. And for me with Golden State, you know, the MO for this team is clear. They're going to move the basketball, they're going to screen, they're going to roll, and they're going to have smart players on the floor. And I think this is a really great option here in Trayce Jackson-Davis because I think he exemplifies all of those qualities they're looking for. He's a smart player who's able to make the extra pass, phenomenal in screen and roll settings, and I also think he's going to set great off-ball screens, which I think is huge for Golden State's offense. They do such a good job of employing non-shooters, and I think Trayce Jackson-Davis, that's really the biggest question for him, is he just doesn't shoot the ball at all from the perimeter. But that's okay, because in Golden State, you can get away with that because Steve Kerr, that offensive system, is built around two of the best shooters of all time so that the other guys don't have to shoot. And they do such a phenomenal job moving the basketball. I think Trayce Jackson-Davis, probably one of the more seamless fits in my first round mock in this rendition. 29 here now, Memphis Grizzlies at this spot. Again, remember, we went at 22 with a player in Ty Washington, who I thought was a really nice pickup for them. And at 29, we're going to go ahead and complement it here with Ron Harper Jr., who kind of fills what is going to become a missing hole. First of all, Kyle Anderson's headed toward free agency as well. Very possible we see him pick up a pretty nice contract. But I think another thing here, when you looked at what was going on specifically with Memphis in the postseason, it became clear that they could not play Kyle Anderson and Brandon Clark together in the playoffs because of the lack of shooting. And here at this spot, I think Ron Harper Jr. becomes a really nice replacement for him. But also, you have to look at Dillon Brooks. What is he going to get as a contract long term? I think Ron Harper Jr. is a better Dillon Brooks. I think he's going to be very reliable in the NBA. He's the son of former 5-time NBA champion Ron Harper. And I think ultimately, when you think about what Ron Harper Jr. is going to be good at in the NBA, he's going to be a multi-positional defender who can knock down open jump shots, put the ball on the deck a little bit, hit some moving shots in the mid-range. And I think it's going to add a phenomenal little missing piece here that Memphis has. Memphis has shown, and Zach Kleiman, their GM and president, has shown he's not afraid to take older players. He did with Desmond Bane, who was a senior out of TCU. Now he's going to do it here with Ron Harper Jr., who's a senior out of Rutgers. Then pick 30, the final pick here of the first round. And I have the Oklahoma City Thunder here at this spot, going with guard/forward Bryce McGowan, who stands at 6'7" and has a unique shot creation upside to him that other players in this class just simply do not have. He's very fluid with the basketball in his hands, but the efficiency was brutal. But if I know anything about Sam Presti, this is a very Sam Presti type of pick. He's looking for a player who has that boomer bust upside, specifically at 30 after drafting Chet Holmgren already in this draft. I think that Oklahoma City is in a situation where if they get Chet Holmgren, AJ Griffin, they can go with a high upside pick here in a player like Bryce McGowan, who at Nebraska was clearly their best player. Now, the Cornhuskers really struggled this past year, but also ultimately, I think McGowan's was not the player to blame there, even though low efficiency numbers from him. I just think ultimately there wasn't enough talent around him. You put him in an OKC system where you have guys like SGA and Trey Mann and Josh Giddey and Chet Holmgren and AJ Griffin, and the floor is going to be so much better space for him, and it's going to be a brand new environment for him that he's not used to playing in. I feel like the game's going to play slower for him. The court's going to feel way more open, and I think McGowan's is ready to take steps forward fairly quickly into his NBA career. Probably not too much in year one, but maybe by years 2 and 3, we start to see more McGowan's run for the Thunder. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. Again, I'm so excited that we had the NBA draft lottery today. It was absolutely crazy. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe. Only about 10% of our viewers are subscribed to the channel. It would be a great deal of help if you guys could hit that subscribe button. Again, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.